Today, we're breaking the illusion of reality TV, going behind the scenes and exposing the secrets of one of the most successful reality shows of the last several decades, Pawn Stars. Pawn Stars is about a family-run pawn shop in Las Vegas where people bring their weird and wonderful items to pawn or sell. It was a monster success for the History Channel when it launched in 2009 and had 22 seasons. People have always been asking, how real is reality TV and how real is Pawn Stars? And unfortunately, the answer seems to be not very real at all. Most viewers would be surprised to hear that the show was filmed on a set and not in the actual famous gold and silver pawn shop. On top of showing you where the show is really filmed and the behind the scenes, we'll also be discussing the controversies, arrests, lawsuits, highs and lows of the stars of Pawn Stars, Rick Harrison, Corey, the late Old Man, and Chumlee. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the actual behind the scenes of one of reality TV's biggest fakes, Pawn Stars. Pawn Stars was on our screen for an unbelievable 21 seasons, with the final season airing in 2024. The show aired in 150 countries and was wildly popular from when it very first premiered. And I'm sure many people watching this, especially my age and younger, have many memories of watching the show with their family. The show was once the #1 show on the History Channel and seemed to come at the exact right time. When the show launched in 2009, many people in the US were still feeling the effects from the financial crash of 2008. So Pawn Stars and its sister series like Hardcore Porn and the other series in that kind of genre, like Storage Wars, fed into this kind of fantasy at the time that a lot of people had, that they would end up having all their financial problems solved if they were able to find something in their attic or inherit something from a relative that would be revealed to be worth a lot of money. Pawn Stars probably would have been popular if it was released at any other time, but it really seems as though the show's release just after the financial crisis made it a juggernaut. Even though the show went on to have unbelievable success over more than a decade, the network executives weren't easily sold on the premise originally. Rick Harrison, the owner of the shop, and his dad, Richard Harrison, who was better known as the Old Man, always thought that there was potential with a show being set in their pawn shop, and they tried for several years to get a show about their shop made. In 2001, PBS actually made a documentary on the Harrisons' store, the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, and 2 years after that, Rick and the shop were featured in a Las Vegas episode of Insomniac with Dave Attell. For years after their brush with fame, Rick tried to pitch the show to other networks, but there was no takers. Rick really thought the premise had weight due to there being successful shows that were kind of in this realm, with things like the British institution Antiques Roadshow. A few years after the PBS documentary and the one episode with Dave Attell, Rick signed a deal with HBO, thinking this was his big break and they were finally going to make a show about his shop. But the HBO show didn't ever make it to the airwaves. The HBO show had a very different focus to what would end up being Pawn Stars. The show that was going to be made at HBO was going to pretty much solely focus on the night window at the Gold and Silver shop. Put a pin in the night window for just a second. As most people are aware, that shop is open 24/7, and the night window idea was done because they thought in the middle of the night in Vegas, hidden cameras, it would feature interesting characters, because people, in the same way like a lot of convenience stores, they only open like kind of a drive-through window at night, but obviously with this, they're just walking up. So they were pitching this, what sort of strange and interesting characters would come up to this night window at 3 a.m. in Vegas. And so the HBO show was pitched as a kind of taxi cab confessions type show. The next part of this story has kind of differing accounts as according to Rick, his HBO deal expired and he then approached Left Field Pictures about doing a show. And the other side of the story is Left Field Pictures had two executives called Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines, and they were in Vegas for a bachelor weekend. And after seeing all of the porn stores and how busy they were late at night with a lot of people trying to get more liquid to go back into the casino, they had an idea for a show. They said that they specifically wanted to do a show around a pawn shop and they wanted to seek out a family-run one with unique characters also. And that's when they were able to quickly find the Gold and Silver shop, as that shop isn't located very far from the Vegas Strip. It's less than 2 miles away from the Strip. Whatever way you look at it, whichever story is true, probably the truth is somewhere in the middle. This is when there was a massive amount of luck that struck Rick, his family, and his shop. The series was picked up by the History Channel by the president Nancy Dubuc under the original title of the show, Pawning History. The show was tweaked a bit, as most shows are, during development and the pilot, and the History Channel wanted to fiddle a bit with the format to kind of make it more in line with what would be usually on their channel. So they added bringing in experts, or to use what most viewers would call these people, Rick's buddies. And they also pivoted to making the show more family orientated, which was a great move because, as I said at the beginning, I think most people, when I've asked them about this show or when I've been saying to people, oh, I'm going to do a video on porn stars, nearly everyone has said, oh, I used to watch that show with my parents or my siblings. And it seems to be one of those shows that was just easy to throw on and wasn't necessarily anyone's like die-hard favorite show, but pretty much everybody liked it because it is one of those shows that I think is just something that ticks a lot of boxes and it's not really too controversial, or people don't really have too many extreme views about it. So while the show was being developed, there was actually a staffer from Left Field Pictures that suggested the extremely clever and catchy title of Pawn Stars, which is so much better than Pawning History. The show was then ready to launch, and it aired its first episode on July 19th, 2009. The show centered around several members of the Harrison family. As I mentioned already, Rick Harrison and his father, the old man, Richard Harrison, and then the two other main cast members are Rick's oldest son, Corey Harrison, and Corey's lifelong best friend who worked at the store too, Austin Russell. Austin Russell's real name was only really widely circulated after he was arrested for some pretty extreme charges, which we'll get into a little bit later, but he exclusively is referred to in the show by his childhood nickname, Chumlee, which was given to him by a friend's father and is based on the main character from the 1960s cartoon, Tennessee's Tuxedo and His Tales. Tennessee Tuxedo, in case you haven't seen it, is about a penguin who has a sidekick that's a walrus named Chumlee. The show and the cast were wildly popular, and all of the cast were made extremely famous and rich from this show. However, no one more so than Chumlee, which is really interesting considering how he is portrayed in the show. We'll get much more into Chumlee later, both his major successes when it comes to business and, as I said, his arrests. But Chumlee is probably the best representation of just how fake this show is. Fake is maybe strong to say. Well staged and scripted are probably better words because there are real elements to the show, but the real elements are very few and far between. The format of the show is extremely uniform. As I said, you just kind of knew what you were going to get week after week. Usually an episode consisted of around 4 to 6 items being brought in by someone into the shop that they wanted to sell. 1 or 2 of the main cast members would deal with each seller, evaluate the item, discuss the item, the history of it. If they needed to call in a variety of experts, they would do so, and then the expert would come in, give a bit more information, and then there would be a back and forth on the price, what the person wanted to sell it for, and they either found an amount that they were willing to sell it for or they didn't and they took the item home. The segments were bookended by short interviews with the seller, the interview before discussing the item, where it came from, a little bit of the history, and the amount they were hoping to sell it for. And then the interview at the end, they would usually discuss whether they were happy or unhappy, how the negotiation went, and what they were either going to do with the money, or if there was no deal made, what they were going to do and sell it somewhere else or just take it home. Interestingly, both of these interviews were shot at the same time and were always shot after the seller had had their whole deal and negotiation with Rick, Chum, or Corey. And that's why you'll find sometimes people in those before interviews that are supposed to take place before the negotiation be able to accurately predict what exactly to the dollar amount they are going to sell their item for. The rest of the show is peppered with the porn star's cast sharing information about different items and the variety of experts providing more information, the history and the value of the various items. And then the show would also provide a plethora of on-screen graphics from the price that was being negotiated back and forth to little facts about the item at the bottom of the screen. And then in between the segments or the commercial breaks, there'd be little multiple choice questions. Each episode will also usually feature a small B plot centered around something that's going on at the store, a dynamic between some of the cast members, or on occasion there would be some sort of outing like a trip to another shop or to go see another item. There were a few little episodes where they kind of went on the road, or they would go to get an item restored. A few seasons into the show, there were kind of various spin-offs. Spin-offs is maybe a strong word, but they would have several people that had popped up in the show, usually as experts, like Danny, who was the car, bike, and vehicle expert. He would come in and deal with any sort of vehicle stuff, and eventually he got his own show. Danny would not only come in and give them advice and costs for vehicles that were brought into the store, but he would also restore some of the purchases that the store made. And eventually Danny got his own spin-off that was all around finding and restoring old cars and bikes and cool vehicles, and that show was called Counting Cars. For a little bit of background on the shop itself and the Harrison family, the old man, who sadly passed away at the age of 77 in 2018, was actually a first-class petty officer in the Navy prior to moving to Vegas in 1981 when he purchased the pawn shop. The old man served in the Navy for 20 years after he joined due to an ultimatum, allegedly, as I have never seen him actually speak about this, but it has been widely reported a lot of places. Apparently, when he was 17, he stole a car and was given the choice by the judge to go and serve time or to go into the military. He began dating his future wife around this time too, and in October 1958, he joined the Navy, and 2 years later, in 1960, he married his wife, Joanne Rue. Joanne and the old man ended up having a daughter and 3 sons. The oldest daughter, Sherry, was born with Down syndrome. Sadly, Sherry passed away when she was only 6 years old in 1967, and she passed away when Rick was about 2 years old. He also has an older brother, Joseph, and then he has a younger brother, Chris. When the old man and Joanne moved to Vegas in April 1981, they were starting over after the collapse of their previous business. About halfway through his Navy service, the Harrisons were transferred to San Diego, and while there, the old man's wife, Joanne, obtained her real estate license and opened her own office that the old man also worked in after leaving the Navy. According to the Harrisons, a mixture of declining real estate sales and high interest rates caused the collapse of their business. When the Harrisons moved to Vegas, they only had $5,000, but the old man used that to start the gold and silver shop with the goal of wanting to become pawnbrokers, because when they opened the shop, it wasn't actually a pawn shop yet because there was a lot of red tape around this time about getting a pawn shop license, and it had to do with the population in Vegas, and only so many licenses were allowed per a certain cap of the population. So the OG store was just a shop, and it was opened in a 300 square foot store on Vegas Boulevard, and it was there for 5 years. They then lost that lease and moved just for 2 years to a building on Fremont Street. And then finally in 1989, they both moved to the store where it is today and were able to obtain their pawnbroker's license. Rick had actually dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, and at the time he says he was making $2,000 a week selling fake Gucci bags. When he was 17, Rick's girlfriend Kim fell pregnant and unfortunately miscarried, but he and Kim still decided to get married, and the year after they got married, they were 18, then they got married. The next year in 1981, their first son Corey was born, and 2 years later, their second son Adam was born. Not long after Adam's birth, Kim and Rick separated, and Rick has gone on to get married 4 more times, so he's had 5 wives and obviously 4 divorces, and he has 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters: Corey, Adam, Jake, Serena, Sienna, and Marissa. Sadly, Rick's second oldest son, Adam, who did work in the store but never appeared on the show, passed away in January 2024 at the age of only 39 due to an accidental OD. Even very diligent viewers of the show wouldn't know pretty much any of this information, as nearly everything mentioned in the show about the cast's personal lives, from their wives to the number of children they have, is nearly all completely fabricated and not based on their actual lives. Rick's oldest son, Corey, started helping at the shop from when he was about 9 years old, and his best friend Chumlee was around a lot as a kid too. Corey married his high school sweetheart, Charlene, in 2009, just when the show was starting, but they did go on to divorce in 2015, and 2 years later, Corey married his second wife, Kiki. Corey and Kiki did have a son in 2018, and they named their son Richard after Corey's dad and granddad. But also in 2018, the same year their son was born, and 1 year after they got married, Corey and Kiki divorced. As I mentioned, Chumlee is Corey's lifelong best friend, and he officially started working in the shop when he was 21 in 2003. Both Chum and Corey have struggled with their weight before and during the show, and they both have lost and gained weight over the earlier seasons with diet and exercise, but they did regain all of their lost weight. So both of them did go on to have weight loss surgery, with Chum having the most recent surgery. He had a gastric sleeve in 2019 after he had regained and hit a highest weight of 350 pounds. Although through surgery and changes to his diet and exercise, he has gone on to lose over 160 pounds. Chum wanted to get a handle on his weight as his father passed away very young at the age of only 54, just 2 weeks before Pawn Stars premiered. As I mentioned, Chum became an absolute fan favorite of the show, and while he is depicted as a bit of an idiot on the show, according to a number of sources, he is very far from it, and a lot of the lines that he is saying on the show that makes him look dumb are fed to him by producers and a lot of people involved with the show. Obviously, it's hard to get exact numbers on people's wealth, as a lot of the numbers you see online are absolute garbage. Believe me, there was one that I saw I was worth like 9 million or something like that. If I could get just 1 million, that would be pretty sweet, but A lot of them are very untrue, but it has widely been reported that Chumlee has made the most money off the show due to merchandising, like having t-shirts and hats with his face and sayings on it. And also he has made a significant amount of money through a lot of personal appearances, especially at clubs and bars. Chum actually started a company for his merch, and he ended up selling half the business to Rick for $155,000 so that the merch could be sold in the pawn shop. Most people who have been to the store have commented about how small it is. And most people have also talked about how the vast majority of floor space in the store is taken up by Chum and other cast members' merchandise, as opposed to actual items in the store that are there to be sold. Chum also has a candy company, Chum's Candy, on the boulevard across the street from the shop. Put a pin in the cast for a minute, as we'll get back to discussing them in just a bit when we'll discuss the arrests, and Chum's especially is pretty extensive. So to speak specifically about the actual show, most people are aware that reality TV isn't always what it seems. Actually, it usually isn't. I think most people won't be shocked to hear that Rick isn't just calling his buddy who's flying down to the shop in 5 minutes, but the extent to which Pawn Stars is staged is more extensive than I think most people would guess. Off the bat, you're never going to go in there and see Rick, Chum, or Corey working there. Very, very quickly into the show's run, they stop working there pretty much altogether. And I've heard that even the autographed pictures of them they sell in the store are signed by other employees, which there has to be some sort of irony there that the pawn shop that calls autograph experts down to check if they're buying something fake is allegedly selling fake autographs. Despite the name of the show being Pawn Stars, as anyone who watches the show will tell you, very little pawning, practically none, takes place. For a while, they went with the line that pawning on camera was this gray area, but really it's because people coming in and pawning items is usually a very sad story. Sure, lots of people will come in to sell items to get rid of them, declutter, or just because they'd prefer the cash. But if someone is pawning something, it probably is because they really, really need the money and they don't have any other option. I think a show like Hardcore Pawn probably shows a bit more of an accurate representation of an actual pawn store, although, of course, that also is reality TV and all reality TV is fake too. But on Hardcore Pawn, you're usually seeing that someone is coming into the store because they don't have a bank account and this is the only financial service they can use, rather than like on Pawn Stars where someone's going to come in and sell a Rolex or a cool movie prop or a rare book. On Hardcore Pawn or an actual pawn store, you're more likely to see someone coming in and pawning the TV from their actual living room to get cash to see them through until payday. Then they'll come back after payday, pay to get their TV back, and they might have to do that a couple of times a year. And so for that reason, and because pawning usually has to happen very quickly because someone needs the money right now, they never did much pawning on the show at all. Instead, what really happens is the sellers apply to be on the show months and months in advance. And a large portion of the sellers have no intention of selling their item. They just want to be on TV. The process usually involves someone contacting the producers with their item. And then if the person's picked, they have to make their way to Vegas. They aren't paid. Their travel isn't covered. They are completely on their own to get there. The process of them showing up and filming is basically like any other show. They arrive, there's a backstage, kind of a green room, that room that you see on the store sometimes where there's like a big brown table in a very small room and they have the kind of desk chairs with the big like backs on them. They're all black and they have gold and silver pawns up in gold kind of embroidered on the back of the chair. That room is where they put the sellers that are going to be on the show, and they have like a one-on-one meeting with a producer or a representative from the show. So the seller's brought into that room, and when their item is handed off, while the seller is talking to the producer, the team is looking into the item, pulling up all interesting information, all of the history of the item, and then the team is also relaying that information to Rick, Corey, or Chum, whoever's going to be the person negotiating with the seller. While the seller is talking to the producer, they're just talking about what's going to happen on the show and kind of a beat by beat what they're going to do, and also stressing a lot: don't look in the camera and don't in any way break the fourth wall and acknowledge that we're on a TV show. I'm going to use some clips from a YouTuber, Andrew Wilson, who was on the show selling his dad's Rambo lunchbox. But the YouTuber Andrew talks in his video about how he had no intention of selling it. He just wanted to be on the show. He ended up having Corey and Chum, and in the video, Andrew says he was nervous about having Rick, as someone he knew didn't have a good experience with him. I'm not sure who the person was, as the way the video's cut, it cuts off the name unless that I've missed it, but I will link Andrew's video in the sources with all of my other sources for this video, and I definitely recommend watching it. But what's interesting about Andrew's video is that, yes, he shows the clips from the episode he was in, but he was wearing a watch with a camera in it, so he recorded everything, all the behind the scenes. So keep in mind that the footage is from a watch, and so it's shaky, and he's also not supposed to be recording, so it's from weird angles as well.
So they just had me stand here until she signals me. Check out all their trusses and lights up top.
So after the seller usually speaks to a producer, they're then brought onto the set, and this is something I think people will be really surprised by if they don't know, but that is, they do not film in the store. The very, very, very first and second season they did, but after that they did not. There's actually a set next door to the shop that is a complete replica of the store, bar a few things which I'll point out so you'll be able to know if they're in the real store or not anytime you watch. When you are brought onto the set, they have, like any production, got some extras. And if you've never been an extra or never been in a set, it is really funny when you know what extras have to do. And when you watch like a TV show or a movie and you watch the extras and think about the context of what they're doing, I always laugh whenever I kind of start watching the extras too much, because extras aren't allowed to make any noise or speak because they want the audio to be clean of the people actually speaking. So everything extras are doing, they are just miming. And like any production, they do multiple takes. They also cut things out, trim around, change things a bit. And so it's just funny when you think about extras, especially in like the pawn shop, and they're like miming to one of the workers saying, "Oh, I want to look at that," and things going on in the background. Like none of that is taking place. Like everybody is just pretending, and it's dead silent, which you will also see in Andrew's video. And it makes it even more awkward because yeah, it's just dead silence. Andrew's video also allows you to see the difference between the raw footage of what he has shot and what aired. I have always thought that the cast were pretty obvious, that they were just saying lines, and it really hasn't got any better over time. I actually think it's gotten worse over the years, and I know Corey has spoken with a lot of disdain for the show and the fact it was still going on, and he doesn't even want to return to Las Vegas because of his feelings towards the show. He lives in Mexico now, I believe, and he's been quoted as saying that he can't continue as a 40-something-year-old to continue playing this 23-year-old caricature of himself. Based on what he said, it isn't surprising. The cast all seem like they really are just reading lines that they've actually never even read before. In Andrew's raw footage, you'll see that there's a lot of umming and stuttering and falling over their words.
Okay, definitely a sign of the times, man. I can't imagine sending my kid to school today with a lunchbox of Vietnam vet who had severe PTSD, and
Andrew points out that he says a lot, which is completely normal for someone who has never been on camera before, who's also filming a TV show that they especially like, and that they're speaking to people that are on TV, that are famous. And anybody is going to behave that way and have a few more ums and ahs than they would in everyday life. Even go back to my first YouTube videos, they are horrendous, because even for something as silly as YouTube, I'm sitting in my house alone filming. In the beginning, you kind of have to just get used to doing that, to talking to a camera. And even whenever I did other stuff like camera things, you do just get used to it. And in the beginning with YouTube, I did have so many ums and ahs and all of that stuff. And yes, you can obviously cut a lot of that stuff out, but if you're cutting it out every other word, it looks weird and it just doesn't fit very well and doesn't flow. But when you get more comfortable, you just can remove that from your vocabulary. I don't really ever have to cut out ums or ahs. I make plenty of mistakes, believe me, and have to like cut stuff like that. I've just got used to it over it being my literal job. But I say that because if you listen to Andrew's raw footage, they sound like it's their first day. And I think, yes, it does get old that they're playing a character of themselves and they're having to do pretty much the same thing day after day. And yes, it's being produced and they probably don't have much say, but they're literally making millions and millions of dollars playing themselves and having a pretty easy job. When you compare the cast of porn stars to the cast of a scripted TV show, there really isn't much of a difference, especially in the later seasons. Really, the only difference is that, unfortunately, the porn stars cast aren't very good actors. And when it comes to everything to do with the show, it is all 90% fake, scripted, and shot on a set. They really only apparently have the negotiating that is not faked. And a lot of people on the show don't even end up selling their items because they're just, again, bringing it to be on TV.
Like, why are you selling it?
to get on phone stuff.
I know, you can't reference the show.
I know.
As I said, the set is next door to the shop, and there are a few key ways that you can tell the difference between the actual shop and when they're on the set. There are a few little layout differences, but they aren't very noticeable, especially unless you're super familiar. But there are two major ones that you can tell right away when they are on the set. And the first one is the shots on the set are a lot tighter because there is no ceiling or like regular ceiling on a set. If you've never been on a set, the ceilings are always like really, really high for the lighting and sound, and so they can hang things, and it's, you know, there's lots of factors, but I'll show some pictures and footage from sets that I've been on so you can see. But in the earlier seasons, at some points when they were in the store, the shots you can actually see the ceilings, whereas whenever it's the set, they're just going to be really tight and like cut it off. But there's one thing, if you see it, you can always immediately tell, and you'll always be able to see it at multiple points in every episode because it's the door, and they always show the seller at least looking like they've just come in the door or standing by the door or leaving. And the difference between the set door and the real door is that the real door is glass and completely see-through, and you can see traffic and you can see people walking by, but the set door is completely frosted and you can't see through it at all. As I said, there are a few other little layout differences, certain items, but those are the biggest differences, mainly the door. As I mentioned, a lot of stuff talked about on the show, about the cast's real life especially, the dynamics between the staff and the happenings in the shop are all created for the show. Pretty much everything is staged and created for it, even what they eat for lunch. If you watch earlier episodes, especially, you'll see the cast constantly getting, eating, or talking about Subway for their lunch. And that's because the show had been sponsored by Subway. It was one of the biggest sponsors for the show. They did hide things a little bit better in the beginning, but 4 or 5 seasons in, the show definitely jumped the shark, and that's when they started bringing in celebrities, and things really went off the rail then. It became so polished and just like any other scripted show. They had Steve Carell, who obviously is super popular and everyone loves him from The Office.
Are you Steve Carell?
No, I get that a lot. I'm not.
Okay, yeah, I thought he was a lot shorter.
The hell is that supposed to mean?
But him coming into Pawn Stars kind of disrupts the whole illusion of, oh, these guys are just working in a pawn shop and these people are walking in. Also, Bob Dylan came in and a whole bunch of other people. This is also around the time that they started doing all little extra things for some episodes where they had experts all come in and have a pub quiz in an episode where there were prizes from the shop that were the prizes for the quiz. And around this time is also when they started doing all these spin-offs like Hardcore Pawn, Pawn Stars UK, Counting Cars, and many others. And yes, while like all of the storylines were pretty much staged, this is when they started going like really far with it and doing things like Corey threatening to quit unless he got ownership in the shop. And that just, I mean, it just looks so orchestrated. So most of the stuff about the cast and the shop isn't really true, but if you want to get some actual information about Rick and also Corey, the old man, and Chum, the pawn shop, the pawning business, and the show a little bit, I'd recommend reading Rick's 2011 book, License to Pawn. There isn't a huge amount of information about the show in the book, which I actually think is a good thing. The vast majority of the book is about Rick, his life, getting the pawn shop opened, all the struggles they went through. And I'd say the vast majority of the book is actually about running a pawn shop, obviously before they were on TV. The old man, Corey, and Chum all have chapters in the book too. And in their chapters, they mainly talk about their own lives. Chum and Corey especially talk about their childhood and adolescence and life prior to the show. Rick talks about his wives he had up until 2011, obviously, primarily his first and second wife. Rick was only 18 and 20 when he got married and Corey was born and his brother Adam was born. And when he and his first wife Kim divorced in 1985, when Corey was 3 and Adam was 1, Rick became the primary parent. The next year, he married his second wife Tracy in 1986, and she became the other parent to Corey and Adam. Rick also talks a lot about growing up and how he suffered from seizures as a child, and this meant that he spent a lot of his childhood taking medication and being in bed. He talks about that kind of prompted him to read a lot and developed his interest in history. He talks about running the business, the pawn industry in general, a lot about the unique Vegas clientele, and talks about some regular customers and some eccentric ones too. He also details his not for sale items, which include Brock Williams' 2001 New England Patriots Super Bowl ring, 2 bronze Olympic medals, an ancient adult images tapestry, and Benny Binion's hat. If you don't know who Benny Binion is, he actually started the World Series of Poker, so he's quite the Vegas celebrity. Also, I don't want to cause any riots, so I'm sorry G hasn't been in this video much. I'm filming at slightly different times, and normally this is when she is playing with her toys, and she got this new toy recently that she is obsessed with. She is literally like sitting across from me staring at me because she knows I'm talking about her. So I will put some like little clips in like the corner or something of her because I don't want anyone to riot. This is just an anomaly. I will make sure to film at the times that she wants to have her sleep, but at the moment she is getting her steps in The Old Man's chapter discusses a lot of what I talked about in the beginning, and also the fact he didn't take a sick day since 1994, as of when the book was written in 2011. Corey and Chum detail a lot of their childhood and adolescence since they were both in their 20s when the show started. One thing that they both talk about, and something that I very, very rarely see covered or really mentioned anywhere, is that they both, prior to the show, had addictions to crystal meth. In his chapter, Corey talks about one of his first arrests and how, while he was in jail, he had a chance encounter with his mother. His mother wasn't in his life much as a kid, and he saw this as a sign to get clean. His mother did help, and Corey did live in California for a bit while getting sober, and he returned to Vegas where Rick signed him up for Job Corps, and Corey said this gave him a lot of structure, and shortly after that, with some sobriety under his belt, he was able to start working at the shop. I mentioned earlier about Corey and Chum both having struggles with their weight, and Corey talks about his weight issues starting to become a problem while he was getting sober, as whenever he would have cravings for his substance of choice, he would go to In-N-Out, as that's kind of the deal that he made with himself. Corey had arrests for drug paraphernalia and possession while going through active addiction prior to the show, but he was arrested for a DUI just 2 years ago in 2023. At 2 a.m. on September 8, 2023, an officer saw a white Ford pickup truck veering back and forth between the traffic lane and the bike lane. The officer began following the truck and activated their lights and signaled for the driver to pull over, but the driver was slow to stop, so the officer used the public address system to have the driver stop. The officer then came up and got ID and saw it was Corey, and he said that he had pulled him over due to him failing to maintain his lane. Corey then said that his vehicle does pull to the right, but the officer noticed a smell of alcohol and said that Corey's eyes were bloodshot and watery and they had kind of a blank stare. The officer asked him to step out and said that the smell of alcohol kind of followed him when he got out of the truck, and they did a field sobriety test before taking him into custody. He was asked to provide a blood or breath sample, and that's when he said he should probably ask for a lawyer. A blood sample was taken as they were having some sort of issue with the breathalyzer, and Corey was booked into the Las Vegas City Jail for a DUI. Except for his arrests, most of Corey's media attention has been centered around his divorces. As we talked about earlier, he got divorced from his high school sweetheart 6 years after marriage in 2015, and 2 years later he married his second wife. Multiple sources claimed his first marriage broke down due to his over-partying, and his second marriage only lasted a year. He did get divorced while his wife was pregnant with their son, but there was a lot of back and forth with their divorce because they would constantly post on social media that they were reconciling, and at one point his wife even got his name tattooed on her when they were going through the divorce, but a lot of the time the social media posts would be quickly deleted, but they did actually get divorced a year after they were married. Chum also had a crystal addiction in his adolescence, and he also had an arrest during the run of the show, but his arrest was much more extensive than Corey's. On March 9th, 2016, Russell's home was raided during the course of an investigation into a sexual allegation, and during the search of his home, police found crystal, weed, Xanax, and multiple firearms. Evidence of possible coke use was also found, and Russell was arrested and then released on bond the following day. He was scheduled to appear in court a few days later. On May 23rd, 2016, he was charged with 20 felony counts, including drug and weapons charges. His attorney, David Chesoff, said that he had pleaded guilty to the felony weapons charges and a gross misdemeanor of attempted drug possession in a deal that called for 3 years of probation only and counseling. He never was charged with any assault allegations, although there was a lot of speculation in a lot of the media reports that there was a link to the type of counseling that he had to undergo because the person that he went to that was disclosed, John Palcutt, he is a clinical social worker who specializes in counseling SA offenders. The plea agreement calls for Russell to surrender the substances and the 12 guns police reported seizing from his home. There was quite the range of weapons, and some were registered, some weren't. There was registered handguns and shotguns, but then assault-style MP5s and .2023 caliber rifles that were not registered. There was also a lot of media speculation around the substances because they were in quite large quantities and they were all being stored in jars and little plastic baggies. There was Xanax, crystal, and weed all stored this way, and Russell took this plea agreement because it meant that he wouldn't have a felony for the substances, and there was more speculation at the time that this was done to avoid having a substance felony on his record. People said at the time that this could affect him working in the store and it being a pawnbroker's, but he doesn't work at the store, so I don't think that was going to affect it. And also, it's not him that has the pawnbroking license. I think this was much more to do with his deal with the History Channel, because that doesn't look good. But I also think that they wanted this to go away as quickly as possible. He did have like media in the court when he was doing his plea agreement, but I really think that Russell kind of went the Sunny V2 method, which is the best method, to be honest, of do not say anything, and eventually enough time goes by that people forget. And it has been nearly 10 years since this. It happened in 2016, and he really was not affected by it. Like, yes, there was a lot of reports at the time, but nobody really cares now, and people were still wearing shirts with him on it. He still was on the show all the way to the end. He still was making tons and tons of money, and I really don't think it has been affected in any way. You rarely see it mentioned, if at all. Hi guys, Editing Ash and Editing G here, and I just wanted to add that there wasn't really a lot to say about most of the experts. I just wanted to mention very briefly that one of the experts, the toy or former toy expert, Johnny Jimenez, he was actually arrested while the show was ongoing for domestic battery of his girlfriend. And when that happened, he was cut from the show. Most of the experts, they do just really appear a few minutes every couple of episodes. You got to think the episodes are only 30 minutes. As I said, there's 4, 5, 6 items an episode. And if you're an autograph expert, you might only be called every 4, 5, 6, maybe even more than that episodes. So most of them just show up very occasionally. There are certain experts, like Mark Patton-Hall is probably the person that most people think of when they think of an expert on Pawn Stars. The Beard of Knowledge is what they call him on the show. He is in charge of the Clark County Museum system, and so he has a bunch of different areas and things that he is an expert in. So really, when it's like anything historical or something that doesn't fit into one of the other categories of toys, autographs, whatever it might be, he gets called in a lot of the time. And so he would show up quite frequently. But the reason that I didn't do like a whole deep dive into each of the experts is, one, I don't think that most people would really be interested in that, because they just aren't shown enough, and you just don't really know much about them outside of their area of expertise and very occasional little things that they say. But I do also think that they kind of fall into this weird gray area, because yes, technically they're public figures. They are on a popular TV show over many seasons, but outside of appearing for a few minutes every couple of episodes, I just don't think that most of them really are public figures. Like they just aren't a lot of the time people that have sought out the limelight or tried to capitalize too much on their appearance on the show. Yes, a lot of them will say like featured on Pawn Stars and things like that, but it's not really something that I think is worth maybe adding an extra half an hour to this video, because there are like a lot of experts, and also some of them do get changed out over time. Someone like Johnny Jimenez, the arrest, obviously they quickly nixed him and got someone else that became the toy expert on the show. But there were also other experts. The handwriting autograph expert changed, and most of them, it probably was for something innocent, like they moved or they just got sick of the scheduling and the way things were, or the back-to-back late filming, very simple reasons. I just don't think there is much, to talk about when it comes to the experts. So I just wanted to add that. Although I know outside of Mark Pattonhall, I think the most popular expert, or probably the most popular expert, is Rebecca, the book expert. I think that she is someone that even there is on the Porn Stars YouTube channel and stuff, they will have like little compilations and things like that. And she is usually the name that comes up a lot. The shop worker that outside of the main four that really gets mentioned a lot. Antoine is the security guard. He was the only other person that really ever got mentioned. And Olivia Black, who was someone who they did like one of these contrived storylines around, and she was supposed to be getting trained by Chum, and there was like a whole fake storyline. She was someone that like a lot of audience members liked her, so whenever you look up like porn stars stuff on Google, like her name is normally one of like the autofill answers. And what happened with her is she actually got fired from the whole porn stars universe because she ended up doing modeling adult pictures. The show ended up firing her, like as in History Channel, and they didn't want her on camera anymore, but she never was fired from the shop. She continued to work there, and that was never an issue, obviously, with them. It was just, again, putting it out on television. The same thing with Johnny Jimenez, which is why it is wild that Chumlee like really faced no sort of repercussions, anything like that, or they weren't even thinking about taking him out of the show because he was the most popular person and was making insane money from it and everything like that. So just wanted to add those extra little bits. And back to past me. Nope, not past me. It is future me, actually, because I forgot to add something else. So sorry for the back-to-back like editing Ash and G sections, but I don't know honestly how I skipped this bit in the script. But Rick actually was sued in 2022 by his mother over his share in the shop. I don't know what ended up happening from this lawsuit because I can't find anything that said the lawsuit actually went ahead and there was some sort of conclusion. I can't find anything that says it was dropped. There is speculation by some media outlets that Rick's mother actually passed away, but I'm not sure about that. There is something in the cemetery where the old man is that apparently she's buried there, but I don't know. There's like no death announcement, nothing. And there could have just been that she'd bought the plot and that's where the old man is. But basically, I don't know what ended up becoming of this lawsuit, but it was quite a big deal when it happened. It was like covered in a lot of media and just a lot of news outlets. And the mother claims in her lawsuit, she was 81 at the time too, and the old man died in 2018, and she claims that Rick was supposed to make payments to her every month for 25K, and she said that in 2020 he stopped those payments. Some months they didn't come at all, some months they were for not the right amount. And then she also talked in the lawsuit about how years and years ago that Rick had tricked her into signing over her share of the shop to him. So she said that she had 51% of the shop and the old man had 49%. And when she woke up from a coma and was still hospitalized, Rick ended up getting her to sign her share over. And she said that at the time she didn't know what she was signing. And Rick ended up addressing this, and he said that he felt his mother was being manipulated by other family members. He didn't say this, but I don't know whether he's talking about one of his brothers, because he has two brothers. And there was a lot of talk when the old man passed away that one of the brothers was left out of the will. And apparently, like, he knew that was going to happen. I think there's something with substance use, and that was to do why he was left out. But I don't know that for sure that was the family member Rick was talking about, or whether it was a sibling and other family members. So Again, I don't know what came of it, but I thought it was important to mention. And if there is anything else I find, I'm literally about to upload this as like the last thing I'm doing. I will put any more information in the pinned comment. I don't know what I'm doing with my hand. And also put it in the sources if there's anything else that I find. But really this time, back to Past Me. I think Pawn Stars is definitely a relic of its time. It came around at the exact right time, and after about 5 years, it started a downward turn in quality and the feelings viewers had towards it. I think a show like this coming out today wouldn't be near as popular, and I don't think that it would reach anywhere near the success that Pawn Stars did, because it just is a totally different world. And I think a lot of this style of content people get through YouTube and streaming. And I think that is also why it started a bit of a downward trajectory. Yes, it was being way too overproduced, but I think that would have started anyway because it was going on for so long, but also because of the way that media is produced now. These shows are kind of eras gone by. Rick and Chum have started a podcast called Porn After Dark, and it is definitely another case like Laura Prepon of celebrities hiring fancy and what I assume are very expensive TV producers who don't know anything about YouTube. So everything from the content to the packaging is very poor, and it is performing surprisingly poor for celebrities. But we've seen this so much with other celebrities, Laura Prepon, as I was saying, and even I've seen it with people who have successful businesses or just a lot of money. They either try and buy their way into it, they either get these slick Hollywood producers, and really they'd be better just even going and following Patty Galloway, who's the best YouTube consultant in the world. Obviously I'm biased because I know Patty, but people like that are going to give you much better advice than any of these people that have no experience in YouTube. And again, I'm biased about YouTube. I'm biased about someone like Patty, who is so booked and busy that he would not probably have time. But YouTube strategy, and all my thoughts about the Pawn Stars podcast, that is a completely different topic, because I think that Pawn Stars is kind of an example of this. It is definitely a bit of a relic of the past. And it seems, yes, a lot of the old episodes of the show are having a bit of a resurgence on YouTube in the same way that Kitchen Nightmares did when the episodes started being posted to YouTube. They gained a bit of popularity. It is the much older episodes that don't have that very staged feel to them. But what's also becoming popular is people rewatching them and picking out all the stage stuff, people making videos in the same way that a lot of people made content around Kitchen Nightmares are making content around Pawn Stars and how staged it was, the behind the scenes, and how produced the show was. Because today, what is popular is authenticity and reality as much as you can get it in content and media, because you see a lot of the younger people, they want really nothing to do with produced TV and produced movies and streaming services. It's YouTube and streaming like Twitch and stuff that is far more popular. But that is a topic for another day. This video was a little bit shorter, but that's because the next video is going to come out even faster, because it's not time sensitive, but it's definitely relevant to release it on a certain day. So this one did come out a little bit faster. The next one's going to come out even faster. As I said, we're ramping things up. So look out for that next video soon. If you made it to the end, I so appreciate it. Thank you so much. Leave MVP in the comments so I can thank you. I've left all my social media, Patreon, G social media if you need to get your G fix, and everything else with the sources and everything in the description box and pinned comment. I'll be back very soon with another video. And thank you again so much for watching. As always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Come on. Good girl. Are you ready? Okay. Is that lighting okay for you? Okay, good. You ready? to see you. They don't want to see me. I want to see you. Yeah. You be good and then you get your cookie after, okay? I have your heater on here. Okay, we ready? You ready? You're gonna play hard to get, are you okay?